Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to the Erudition Network interactive Black History and Knowledge session. I am your host, Eddie Phillips, and I am here tonight, as I am typically on every Thursday, to talk about Black history, and to impart some knowledge and some wisdom and some understanding on things we don't often talk about in African and Black culture. This program is on every Thursday, 5 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, 6 o'clock Central Standard Time. You can catch me on. We have another program my wife is on Mondays, 5 Mountain Standard Time, 6 o'clock Central Standard Time. My sons are on for their program where they talk about things that cross the generational peer groups for Erudition Generations on Wednesdays at the same time, 5 and 6. So I am here tonight. This is my time schedule. Has been for the better part of what's going on about 3 years now. So we've been very, very consistent and diligent. Hey, Tina, glad to see you. And keeping this program going. It's kind of a little difficult tonight. Most of my family is ailing. This is that time of the year where we have that cold and flu season and different things. And so a lot of people in the house are ill. But we're here tonight. We're here. Tonight, I was hoping that we could, hey, Pastor Razor, good to see you. Glad you're here. Pastor Rodney, good to see you too. I appreciate you all joining us tonight. I know everybody has these busy schedules, so I really, really appreciate it. You know, one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight is challenging history. You know, very often when oh, my Sonic, yeah, it wasn't all the way melted, baby, so I had to do what I had to do. But no, I'm not advertising for it. That's why I try to turn it. But I guess you can still kind of see the. Okay. But it is what it is. Let me move it because we don't want nobody saying we advertise the Sonic. No, but I got that because it would soothe the throat of my boys today. So that's really what it was. Anyway, what we're talking about today, we're going to talk about challenging history. You know, rather you look at history from different views, different apertures, and how you look at it and how you grow in it. One thing you have to know is that when you are reviewing historical information, there is always going to be pushback. And I'm going to tell you tonight why that is. A lot of it is not because people are rude, ostentatious. It's just the fact that they're going off of what, oh, it's my grandma. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. I sent you one yesterday, but I'm glad that you're here. I love you. Here's the thing. You're going to be challenged. Now, how you approach that challenge, right, will you have to make sure that you are fact-based. That's the one. And that you have studied. See, what happens a lot of times with a lot of people is that we get into these situations where people say things about history. We've been taught history from kindergarten all the way, some of us to 12th grade, some even into college studies. And what happens is we get dead set and locked in a system of thought that that is contrived. And unless we become more of an autodidact learner and try to peel apart that onion to dig deeper, we will only be looking at what is generally known. People die on the hill of the generally known because they don't want to learn anything further. Me and my wife had a conversation the other day about people saying, I'm too old to learn anything else. Well, God didn't make you that way. Every day you learn something, whether you want to or you don't want to, but you learn something. And so the idea of saying, I don't want to learn anymore is ridiculous. Or as my son says, redonkulous, right? It makes absolutely no sense. So better to learn and study your knowledge. And it doesn't matter where you how you go in to your studies. I have friends who are on here tonight who are pastors, who are they go into it from the faith side. Nothing wrong with that. I have friends who are scientists and friends who who are very deep mathematicians, and they try to go into it from that side. It doesn't matter how you approach the knowledge, right? It's just that making sure that what you get is accurate, is real. And if you can't do that, then you're going to find yourself misinterpreting and passing on fiction. And that is what I see a lot of nowadays. I see too much of it. Whether you go on TikTok or whether you're on Facebook or any of that. And then when you come out and you teach what is fact, people say, no, that's not true. And it blows your mind because you say, well, wait a minute, what do you mean that that's not true? Obviously, it's true because I'm telling you this as a fact. One of the examples that I want to use tonight in our conversation tonight is I want to talk about, let's start it at the beginning. Let's start it at the origin of man, because that's always something where people get it wrong. They get it wrong. Hey, good evening, Kendra. Glad to see you. Thank you for joining us. We get it wrong because we assume, right? We have been taught that at the beginning of mankind, there were these things called hominids. And you've heard me talk about this before, and I get a lot of pushback from people who say, well, Eddie, that's what it is, man. We come from this, and that. And they have taught us, I say us, because most of the people in the world have been taught Darwinism, right? Have been taught natural selection. We've been taught these things as if they are a fact. And in truth, they are not really facts. They are what we call a group of parallax things that they have brought together to try to explain a certain thing. I don't know. I think it was I may have said it last week. I was messing around with one or two. It was actually two AI programs online. And I asked the AI programs about the migration of man out of Africa. And I asked, is it a scientific, proven, historical fact? And I'm going to teach you guys something about AI. You can make AI answer with a perspective. You can go and try it tonight if you don't believe me. Because all it is doing is scraping. You can go into any of these AI programs that are out here, and you can say, hey, as a construction expert, can you tell me whatever it may be, the proper setup for an electrical system in a house? You can ask it these things, and it will scrape the internet, scrape the knowledge base that it has, and pull up these things. Now, here's the thing. It may not always be right. Not fully, because what it's going to do is it's going to sometimes run into contradictions. This is what we're seeing when we're challenging knowledge, even with human beings, because there's a set group that believes one thing, and then there's another group that says, no, it's this. And if neither one of them goes to actually pull the fact, then they're just throwing foolery out at each other. But anyway, I asked the AI program to give me, the facts about the migration of man out of Africa, right? As I was working on my book, and I got a crazy response. The first response was that, yes, it is a proven fact, and it gave me all of these citation and things that proved it. So then I asked it the question. I said, well, were the people who left from Africa, and I gave it tribes, right? I gave it tribes. I gave it the Kush, the Uxum people, the people of Asia, the Elam and the Saba, and people of the Indus Valley. I said, well, were these people African? And it answered, no. These people were a diverse culture. They came from multiple places. I said, whoa. So I asked the AI again. I said, but you just told me. So you said in your first response that all life came from Africa. And then it said, yo, that is true. All life came from Africa. So I said, well, how do you're contradicting yourself. Then it apologized. I apologize. There are many things that are out here that say life comes from Africa, that is proven. And then there are other things that are out here from archaeologists and things like that. So what is it saying? It's saying that there is data that has been put out here on our internet, in our system, that are lies. And this new thrust in AI is dangerous because what it's doing is it can't give you the answer because it has to go scrape both the lie and the truth. And somehow you, by syncretism, try to bring it together to give you an answer. That's not factual. And what happens is then people are further lost. So where are we right now? We're at a point in human history where you got to be the man in the machine. You got to challenge the knowledge and the things that are out here. You got to be actively challenging it. Comments here. I think it's not that people don't learn. I think people know what they're being taught is crap. Most people I survey over the years don't trust the information they receive or are taught. Good to see you, Eric. Well, that's true, Tina. That is absolutely true. But here's the thing. We can find facts. Why? Because as you go back into those times of the origin of man, as we were talking about a moment ago about hominids, right? I had a conversation with a historian. It's been about a year ago. And he said, I heard you don't believe in hominids. I said, it's not that I don't believe that there were creatures, right, who we call hominids that existed. But their relation to man, I don't buy. Because here's the thing. There is no proof that they are related to us. And when you delve deep enough genetically, the people challenge and say, oh, well, we can't pull the genetic information, those Y chromosomes, right? Or those Eve chromosomes. We can't pull that to kind of tell you but we can trace where the first Homo sapien, which is supposed to be who we are. So how do you relate us to the Australopithecus, to the Cro-Magnon man, to Neanderthal? How do you do that? You do it because it then allows you, and I'm going to give you why I challenge it. It gives you the ability to say, well, man was in different places. Because once I associate that hominid as a relative of man, now I can say, well, there was Australopithecus bones in New Zealand, and there were some that were as far up as Britain, and I can say that man was in different places, and I no longer have to agree with you that life came out of Africa. And to validate it, I need something to bring it together. So what do? I use Darwinism. Darwin knew nothing about genetics. Darwin made a theory based on what he believed happened with the world. He was right to some extent that man can evolve, that man can go to a place, and by the nature of where he is a creature that can evolve. But that does not mean that a creature, that would be like pulling up the bones of a chimpanzee and saying that that's a man, because I found that chimpanzee's bones in the area that man lived. 5,000 years from now, people in say San Diego, right? Something happens and they all pass away at the San Diego Zoo. But because you saw apes and human bones in the same area, you just assume, oh, they must have been related. But evolution is evolution. You can't evolve and then stay in the same place. What do I mean by that? You can't be a creature, all right? You can't be a creature and then still have an evolved man at the same time. How was that evolution? And people get mad, but they got mad at the wrong thing. They got mad at the wrong thing for years. Now you have geneticists and people getting involved, historians getting involved and saying, wait a minute, let's not just say that all of these things were related to man. We got to challenge those theories, Pastor Razor. Yes, we have to actively challenge this misguided. Since I have been posting excerpts from my book, I've heard numerous explanations of the origin of man, and they all are in opposition to the Bible and science, from Adam and Eve being metaphors to Black people coming from another planet. It's always the aliens, prior to Adam and Eve's creation, etc. You name it, and it has made me further research the biblical position to defend against this. I would appear that these theories would be coming from uneducated. That is true. And then there's some other part of that too. Have you considered a reason for providing questionable information was so that people could not challenge info because they don't have any qualified knowledge? Yes, I have, Tina. And yes, I have, Pastor Riz. I've seen exactly what you're talking about. Let me tell you this. Because so much of our history has been owned, and over the last, I'd venture to tell you, over the last, at least let's be generous, over the last 1,000 years, because we haven't controlled our own history. Our history has been given to us. Our history has been found for us. Then we run into this problem of biased positions on history. Bias not because necessarily of color all the time, bias because of the nation. Because I am a European, or because I am a Roman and you're a Carthaginian, because I'm from Cush and you're from Egypt. Whatever it may be, right? We have allowed ourselves to be manipulated. I had a conversation recently about the idea of how knowledge spread. Very often we give a lot of credit to different cultures for doing different things. And we do that because we feel that, well, that's what we've been taught. That's what the experts tell us. I'm going to give you an example. So we know that that language from us, as we see it, Mesopotamia, right? They created what is known as the social idea of written language, right? However, we also know that the Egyptians, the Phoenicians, the Cushites, we know that they also had, I won't say a fully adapted language as we see with that which was used in the Mesopotamian era, but what you will definitely see if you dig deep enough, right, you will see the comparison from the Phoenician, from the Sumerian, the Egyptian. You will see that they wrote on cuneiform, right? You'll see how they adapted that language. I'm trying to pull it up right now. I used to have a chart that showed kind of somehow how this all worked out and how the Sinaitic, the Phoenician, the Greek, the Latin, the Roman, and even our modern, I'm gonna see if I know I got it on here, how all of that was established. So though the Egyptians were writing in hieroglyphics, right? And though early man was writing on a wall, and though we can see writings on walls in Ethiopia, and Northern Africa, Middle Africa, we see what is considered to be writing, right? We place the development, and that's the key, the development of fully thought out writing on the Sumerians because they used that writing for trade. They used that writing for policy. And we know that because we can go back and pull up, right, those Sumerian and Mesopotamian stones and see the writing. But we can also look on the walls of Egypt. We can, some places in Kush and in Nubia, you can see the same thing. The point is that it takes digging. Very often, we're not digging enough. Very often, we're not going deeper enough. Tina, have you considered, I asked you this. I've ran into people who are teaching misguided theories and they don't know it was in error until it's debated. Then some of them ask me, did it? Oh, exactly. So I was talking with that's when we're home in Chicago, Tina's uncle. He asked me, he said, Eddie, what makes you want to study certain things? How do you decipher some of this information? How do you go in and pull this information out? And I honestly told him, I said, prayer a lot of times and being led by different things that lead me down a path. I choose, like I told you all earlier, I choose the way I want to figure it out. Hey, that's interesting to me. And then I go deeper and I go deeper and I go deeper till I get that baseline understanding. I used to tell my guys in the Navy to explain it to me like you are in second grade. Because if you can explain something simplistically at the lowest and most fundamental level, then you understand it. And I find that so many people, me and my wife have talked about this, they give a high view of what's going on, that they don't dig deep enough to find out if what they're saying is absolutely true. And then, like you said, Pastor Razor, until they're debated, until something comes up, until it's exposed, oh, I didn't know that. And so it is on us to challenge these things. Challenge these things. The other day, speaking of that, I saw when I was watching the Bible study, and it was mentioned by Alexander, right? And that spurred something in me because I spent a lot of time studying Alexander the Great. And the reason why was not because I loved Alexander the Great, is because every time someone, I brought up the value of African people or the value of African knowledge. Somebody always told me, well, it's not that important because if they were that smart, they wouldn't have been conquered by Alexander the Great. If it was that important, right, then why don't we know about it? Most of this came from the Greeks and the Romans, and they would argue this European idea of where knowledge came from. And they never considered the fact that the very things they were saying were loony. They were crazy. And they were crazy because that's us acting as if there is no migration of man. Will you look at Africans as they trekked across the globe? Whatever knowledge that they had there, they took it with them. They took it with them. How to grow crops, how to live while migrating, right? We know, and as you guys get my book, my new book that's coming out, 101 questions, one of the questions that I wanted to ask in there were, who were these people that migrated and how did they migrate? How did those ancient migrations affect the world that we see today? Migration had to happen due to trade. You have to be able to live. When we look even now in our closer time, and we look at, I've done lessons talking about the Maroons, the slaves who escaped and lived in the swamps and the different areas. But here's the thing. They always kept a way to get back to the plantation, to get supplies that they needed, and to grab up other slaves, members of their families. The establishments of what you consider to be the Underground Railroad and everything else didn't start because white people were doing, they helped. It was because what happened was these Maroons, these people learned with the Native Americans how to maneuver and how to move and how to be able to go back when they needed to supply themselves. This is the same mentality of Africans leaving Africa, going into themselves all the way to the west, as far as Mesopotamia, as far as the Indus Valley, as far as Asia, as far as Australia, New Zealand, the islands, all of that. You take that knowledge with you. Across the globe, man, rather you go from Europe into Malaysia, until you go into Mongolia, rather you go into the Philippines, rather you go into Australia, you will find people knew how to hunt and gather. You will find that people knew how to plant crops. That didn't just happen and it just appeared and they understood that. And because we don't dig deep enough, we run into these problems. The Greek philosophers, right? All of your Greek philosophers, they studied from the philosophy and the thought. I'm not making that up. History shows you that, of what was in Africa. What was in Africa? And there were historians like Diodorus, Herodotus, right? Clement of Alexandria, who told you that these people went to go study. They wrote it in their records that they went to go study. But we don't look at that. We don't look at that. The idea of the ancient writings that we see in Egypt, that we see in Nubia, philosophy as we know it, as we have been presented it by Greek philosophers, started in Africa, because that's where man started. That's not racist. That's not taking over the fact that people weren't intelligent, but it's telling you where the genesis started. If you look at Platon, he was an ethical philosopher. If you look at Cabinian, right? If you look at Mereca, right? And I can go on and on and on. Amenhotep, son of Hepu, right? These were very intelligent people. They were African. And people went to find out, where did they get their information from? What makes you think this way? But we don't know those people. We know Plato. We know Aristotle. We know those people because that's who we've been told the knowledge came from. It's important to know that there was trade between the Carthaginians, the other tribes of Northern Africa, the Egyptians, the people of Mesopotamia, even as far as going into the Indus Valley, even the people in India and China. It's important to know that the ancient world had these connections for centuries. For centuries. It's important to know why certain things stopped. One key fundamental thing that happened in history is the rise of the Roman Republic. Yeah, we could look at Greece, but the Romans, the Greeks, except for maybe the Spartans, they had a very wanting to learn philosophy from Africa. I call it borrowing, because they did a lot of borrowing. But the Romans, they had a conquering mentality. That's why it's called the Roman Empire. And when the Romans took over, they took over things to control. Egypt, parts of Northern Africa came under Roman control. And we forget that. We ignore that. There were wars. First, second, and third Punic Wars. That's where Hannibal Barca is recognized from. Because of the warring mentality of the Romans, right? Because of the idea that we're going to control. It's important that you know the history of Carthage and Numidia and how Numidia fought alongside Carthage and flipped to go fight against Carthage and destroy Carthage for the Romans. It's important that you understand that Carthage was developed from Tyre, the Phoenician city of Tyre. And they understand that the Phoenician city of Tyre is mentioned in the Bible as having contributed to the building of the temple of God. Those connections and digging deeper don't happen just because somebody told you. You got to dig. You got to read. I tell people all the time, you got to put God in your intelligence. You got to put God in your intelligence. Prayer. I don't understand. Just like you pray to say, I don't understand this Bible verse here. I don't understand what what was supposed to be explained to me here. Same thing when it comes down to your history, to your knowledge, to your understanding. Guide me. Show me what I need to know. There's a guy online, one of these groups. Every day he puts out, he has thousands of followers. And I'm not hating on him for his followers. But every day I see him with a book. He puts up a book, right? And he takes a picture of the book and he says, this is a good book to read. And it's a book on Black history. Great. Got no problem with it. Well, recently he put up a book that I had suggested on this show. And people started to ask about the book. And he couldn't answer anything about the book. And so I concluded, are you reading these books? Are you actually studying? Because here's the thing. I have a lot of books. I read a lot of books. But I'm never going to tell you to grab a book that I haven't read myself. And I do that for a reason. Now, I ain't going to put his name out there. But yeah, he's somebody, I'm sure you've seen it. And his intentions are good, Mike. He wants to teach Black history. But I challenge you to read. Reading is a muscle. You flex it enough, you become better at it, faster at it. You can read multiple things and understand it. But you got to read. Because if you're just telling me that this is a book and you can't tell me what's in the book, then how can you lose credibility with me? Because now I'm like, hey, are you reading this? Right? That's what research is. That's what it is. No, Mike, but I'm not going to put his name. Some history suggests after the Garden of Eden, man had to take raw materials to make whatever they needed. Thus, suggested man possessed knowledge. Building skills were the question, not knowledge. So, I get what you're saying. God did not completely abandon man. We know that. We see that when we pick up our Bibles. But the difference is how we got that knowledge and how we passed it on. There is it is hard to say it, but there is, and I'm being nice, ladies and gentlemen, when I say 1,000 years. There has been a scheme, that's the better way for me to say it, to hide the idea of where knowledge comes from. Whether you call it Western civilization history, right? Whatever you want to call it, that's what it is. Your desire to hide so that you jump from, you barely talk about. I was on someone's show about a week ago, and one of the points that I was making is when I teach history, right, I try to make people think about, just all of you all who are watching live tonight, think about the time when you were a young person, your first experience of having a history book, of picking up that history book and opening it up, and they showed you all of this stuff about early man. You might have saw somebody with a spear that didn't really look black, but they were brown. They might have told you about Beringa coming over to Bering Strait. They gave you all of these things. And then they jumped to talking about, maybe they talked about Egypt a little bit, but they made sure to let you know that the Egyptians were a diverse people and not necessarily black. Right? Yes, they taught you about Cro-Magnon man. They taught you about evolution. They put all of that in there, and you kind of followed the story of it. But here's the thing: as a black person of African descent, the first time you saw somebody that really looked like you, they either had chains on them, they looked like they were being whipped, they were being sold. And that established something to your adolescent mind of, whoa, this is my history. This is where I come from. Right? This is that's what I'm supposed to identify with. Whereas the white kids are being told about the Roman Empire, the Greek philosophers. They're being told about the kings and queens of France and England and told about all of these wondrous things that went on. They're being told about the Renaissance, and everybody looks like them. But not you. This is my issue with 1619. I refuse to ever establish my history as saying that I am a slave and that's all my people ever contributed, right? I refuse to do that because that reminds me of that young kid sitting there looking for knowledge and being told, well, your people were slaves and they stayed slaves for hundreds of years. And then to throw more salt on the wound, I'm gonna tell you that you wouldn't have been slaves if your own people wouldn't have sold you into slavery. Let me throw that lie in the mix. And let's leave out the Esencia del Negro and the agreements and the contracts that allow Europeans, English, Portuguese, Spanish. Let's ignore the fact that that was their agreement and that they went and married into African tribes for the chief purpose of selling Africans across the seas in order to be enslaved. Let's ignore that point. Let's not dig deep into that. Let's just say, no, you did it to yourself. Let's ignore that the richest people in the world were not the Rockefellers, but they were Africans. Because that's where the gold was. That's where the produce, and as I was going through the questions in my new book, I was trying to figure out what questions do I ask to lead people to where they need to be. It's not a history book in a way that I'm going to tell you directly, but I'm asking questions that you should ask yourself that you may not know to ask. And I'm breaking them down in eras. We have to challenge history. You said the first thing I recall being introduced in regard to Black history was roots. Yeah. And it's the anniversary of that right now. And you know, it's amazing to me. I was having a conversation, I think it was Tony Briscoe, and I was telling them, you know, Alex Haley, God rest his soul, did tell a story that is factual. But I question the motives behind it because Alex Haley took that story and he got sued for it from a white dude. And then there was things that we found out that weren't really part of his history, right? But they're true. And I said, well, did they do that to make us think that some of this stuff is false? Because remember, there are people in the South, even to this day, who believe in the glorious slavery motif, the idea that slaves was happy being enslaved, that everything was just peachy keen, and that we were worse off being freed. But again, it comes down to digging and reading. And I missed some of you guys' comments. Pastor Razor, you mentioned hunting. Western theology has demonized Nimrod, but God said in the inspired scripture that he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. When I researched him, he was listed as the greatest king of Mesopotamia, and the records that have been unearthed indicated he stabilized the land. He saved humanity by teaching them how to hunt for food. That is extremely important because the cultures that developed, right, from Northern Africa, from internal Africa, and pushed up north. When you look at the at Sheba, right, Sheba people, and you look at what they were known for, right, in the trade of incense and spices and things like that were needed in the world that everybody didn't have, that were burned in their temples. When you tell me, again, that Prince Henry the Navigator was the first person to ever sail around the coastal waters of Africa, and I know that that is a lie because the Phoenicians went as far as Britain to trade in tin. When I know that the Phoenicians, by the Bible itself, the Bible tells me that they traded all over the African world through the Horn, through the Red Sea, and they spoke of Solomon. They spoke of the people in northern Africa. They spoke of the Israelites. They spoke of this, and this went through entire Africa, or Ethiopia, as they called it in the Bible. But when we don't see what is written before us, what has been put to us and we don't study enough, it becomes a problem. This is why I had an issue with the guy who was just showing the books. Read. Yeah, the book is interesting. I like the cover, but read it. We are in the information age. You don't even have to read a book. You can put some headphones on, sit back in your chair, and somebody will read to you. You can rewind, retouch. Oh, I didn't catch that part. I dozed off. Let me go back. Oh, that's what he said. You can do all of that. That's the world that we're in right now. Tony Briscoe, good to see you. Challenge the history that you see. One of a friend of mine who is a historian, when I spoke on the other day, I talked about how we're talking about Alexander. He couldn't dispute what I posted, but what he did say was, well, that's a pretty basic maneuver. It's a pretty basic tactic, especially, blah, 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 blah. But what that was amusing to me, because he couldn't definitively argue that Alexander did not get that tactic. And if you guys haven't read the post, we're talking about Alexander the Great. And in 331 BCE, right? He invaded Mesopotamia. He invaded Mesopotamia because he understood the value of Mesopotamia, the knowledge that was there. He understood that because his instructor was Aristotle. His instructor was a Greek philosopher who understood the value, who always talked about how intelligent and bright the African was, and understanding that a lot of the knowledge from Africa had made its way into Mesopotamia, and they built civilization there. So when Alexander the Great went up against King Darius III, he used an African tactic to beat a larger army. And the tactic has been used for millennia, the hammer and the anvil. It is an African war technique. The Nubians and Saudi, they use this technique. They use this technique even into modern time. And though he said it's in his comment, it's a pretty basic tactic, it's effective. It was used in World War II. It's a tactic that works, but that's not the point. The point is Alexander the Great conquered what is known as the modern world using African tactics, but we're never taught that. We're told that Alexander, who they straight up want you to know was of Greek descent, right? The golden boy. Oh, he did all of these amazing things. And I think it's important that we know, yeah, that very tactic that he was so famous in using, he learned that because Aristotle learned that. Because his teachers who taught him knew that, because they went and studied African history. No Greek philosopher or teacher worth anything did not study African knowledge. You can look at Socrates and you will see it dig deep enough. Matter of fact, I'm going to pull up a quote from Socrates. Socrates said, if you were to write a book of 1,000 pages, you could not put down the names of all Greeks who went to the Nile Valley and ancient Egypt to be educated. There you go. That's just the truth. But because we don't dig. And so when you are challenged, right, I want you to have that knowledge. Yes, yes. And I've sent him a thing. I asked him, I said, if you want some books that I think you really should read, I got some that you could really read, right? I love seeing the church promoting researching, learning, etc. Because and all that I get and get an understanding. Previously, churches didn't seem to support it, but blind followership. We're living in a different era, Tina, and I appreciate. I agree with you, sweetie. That's what we need to be. I came across an article and thought it was. I'm gonna check it out. And that knowledge in Mesopotamia and Alexander cover. Yes. Me and my son, I think talked about this last week. We were talking about how, they tell you about the great burning, right, of the Library of Alexandria, right? They talk to you about how they burned this library, and that pushed the world into the dark ages because they didn't have knowledge, right? But I often push back on it because here's the reality. Knowledge wasn't just in one place. You had areas of knowledge that still exist today. In Mali, Timbuktu. You had places in Ethiopia. You had places where people still knew things. And what happened is, as you look through the Romans, people actually don't think, do you realize why the Romans wanted to rule Egypt so badly? Do you know why the Romans made several incursions into Kush, and that the Kushites fought them all the time? You wonder why the Romans decided that they were going to fight the Carthaginians and manipulate the Numidians? There's a reason. That desire for knowledge. They became a greater culture by taking that knowledge and adding it to themselves. That's why they reigned for so long. They took the knowledge of the Phoenicians who sailed. They took the knowledge of the Numidians who were great horsemen. They took the knowledge of the Carthaginians who were great traders. They took this knowledge to strengthen themselves. And in taking it, they owned it. And we have lost our understanding of where it comes from unless you dig deep enough. People can quote to me Shakespeare all day, but few of them have ever gone and picked up a book to read the ancient texts of these philosophers, of these thinkers, of these men who wrote this stuff down. And so if you don't want to read it yourself, I tell people, I tell you what, join me on Thursday nights. Ask the question. We'll unpack it together. We'll unpack it together. I asked the question about a week ago because I didn't know if I was going to put it in my book or not. But I asked the question of, name me one archaeological artifact that was found in ancient Sumerian, in a major ancient Sumerian tomb that suggests contact between Africa and the early Mesopotamian civilizations. And I got really no response to it. And that sometimes happens. I don't belabor anybody for not answering it. But at the same time, it showed me what people don't know, because there are many artifacts, right? But I wanted one specifically because it obviously shows that there was interaction, that you can't say it wasn't, right? And it's in the Royal Cemetery of Ur. I'm gonna give you guys the answer tonight. It's in the Royal Cemetery of Ur, right? It is a headdress. And on it, it shows you, right, the connection between Africa and the Mesopotamian people. But a lot of folks did not answer the question. It's called the Standard of Ur. It's found in the 1920s. I try very hard to dig and dig and dig so that others don't have to. But I always try to tell you, hey, this is where you go find that. Read it on your own. That's why we do this every Thursday. And as we're coming into Black History Month, I'm trying to do much more of that. You know, I try to do a lot of that. Abram Pachach, African Russian general who never got the honor he deserved. Look that up. I emphasize in my new book that the Africans that God sent to Mesopotamia were very intelligent. The output of their work is what established civilization as we know it today. I give a very comprehensive account of this in my new book, and as well you should. And if you haven't, go out there and order Pastor Royce's new book. I think it's still, you can get it on Amazon. I know I ordered mine on Amazon, and I'll put a link in here later on probably after we finish. I know it's on the Erudition Network page, but I want to support him and others who are actively out here trying and pushing the research to try to get us to have a better understanding of who we are, where we come from. And if we can do that, I think we become a more appreciative, more stable people, because right now, many of us out here, either we don't know or we're believing propaganda. There's that famous guy who used to be on the History Channel that would always say it's aliens. And I got so tired of seeing that guy. Right? Because it was easier for them. It's so illogical. It was easier to say, here's a studied historian. It was easier to say that something is out of this world than to give credit to the African. And then we come up with these spectacular, right, ideas of what's going on that make no sense. Where's the record of names being African, the great thinkers, philosophers? Yeah, we do know. And I gave you some tonight. We do know. Well, some of us know. I shouldn't say we don't, right? But a lot of times we're being told that either, and let me tell you something. When I was a young teenager and I was starting to read about Egyptian and Nubian thinkers, all people got mad. I got a lot of pushback. Well, that book you read now, they got a weird symbol on it. Is that witchcraft? And it wasn't that I'm trying to study witchcraft. It wasn't that I was trying to study Egyptian spirituality. But you have to understand that if you're talking about someone from 2700 BCE, they have a belief system that pushed them to do whatever they were doing. So if I'm reading about Imhotep, right? It's not that I believe in the same things that Imhotep believed in, but I am looking at what did he come up with. He was a great architect. What did he build? It's the same thing when you look at any of these peoples, Amenhotep, Dwarf, right? When you look at Kayamini, right? You look at these people and you see what they built and what they wrote down. Some of them were great philosophers that you later see inspire people like Buddha and all these other Eastern religions and things like that. They were inspired by these people, but you got to dig. You got to ask the question to yourself and to God. Hey, what was this about? Because you're not going to be able to challenge foolery without the weapons to challenge it. You're not going to be able to draw the understanding of the African, the Egyptian, the people of Mesopotamia, the Asian. You're not going to be the indigenous people of the Americas. You can't draw all that together if you only know a small parallax side of the history. You got to delve into it. What else here? How much longer until we can't get your book? I'm going to stop asking questions because you're skipping me. I've answered every question that you want on here. You're sick, and so you are a little pouty, but I've answered every question that you want here. I just answered your other question. Why we're the most talked about philosophers? Well, I just told you why. I just told you why. How much longer? So let me tell you about this book. Because it's interactive, and what I mean by that, the first version of it is an ebook, interactive book. I'm doing this to make sure that you can have it on your phone, on your tablet, and you can click it and ask questions, and it'll answer the question, answer it wrong. It'll tell you you're wrong. And then when you get it, as always, right, you're going to see a description that's going to let you know why the answer to that question is correct. It's not just going to be me going, yeah, you're correct, and move on. But I also want to do it in a hard copy so that you can also have it as a hard copy question book that will probably have the answers at the back and stuff like that. So we'll be doing some of that stuff too. So I didn't say that question. I list multiple in my book. I emphasize the connection to the point of showing that even Abraham was an African Sumerian. Yeah, it's important to pull those things up. That's why I think it's very important that people go out and get that book and they read and they understand those connections. She's not feeling well, so my wife, she gets a little pouty, but she's okay. Thank you. It's just something that we just need to be doing. Oh yeah, Mike, I'll be watching you guys' show tomorrow too. I need your books now, sir. Please and thanks. My wife. Yeah, I'm glad that you guys are looking forward to it. I am too. I am working it. Part of me feels that at first I felt that 101 questions was too much. And then I said, man, I feel like maybe 101 questions was too little. But I'm going to stick to the 101 questions because I want to break it out in 3 parts as we get closer and try to uncover more history. So, and I want people to discuss it when we get on these shows and we do other things. So, yeah, it will definitely be coming. I am actively, honestly working on it and trying to get it done. Tina knows that. I sit here on the computer trying to get this stuff done, but I'm anxious for it. Ladies and gentlemen, I didn't realize it's been an hour. It's been an hour. And, you know, I appreciate all of you all on here tonight. What? I just said that it's a serious, you already know this. Again, please pray for my family. All of them are a little ill. They got that touch of flu that's going around. But I pray that they'll all be okay. And I pray that they do not get me sick. That's been my biggest prayer. So I got my mask sitting right up here somewhere right now. So when I go in there, they're not going to cough on me. But hey, I appreciate everybody who supports and helps with the Erudition Network. I did not put the banner up. Usually my son will do that. I'll put it on here right now. Hey, anything, and I do appreciate you guys who have definitely helped us with this effort. You can always donate to the Erudition Network through the Cash App. We just went out and bought a new, because I'm chief in showing people a new monitor for my camera as we get ready to do these lessons that are coming up after this book is put out. So we definitely use what you provide to us to grow this network, and we greatly appreciate it. It helps us with our cameras, mics, and different things like that. But I'm gonna get out of here, get back to this book, and try to get some things out here as we approach Black History Month. If you have something that you want me to discuss on Black History Month, please hit me in chat. You could hit me in chat off this program on YouTube, whatever, and let me know, because I want to make sure we're covering things that are relevant to you all and that makes you want to come Thursdays and sit down and as we have this interactive discussion. All right, I've said enough. Let me get out of here. You all have a blessed rest of your week, and we will, God willing, see you next Thursday. Thanks again. Bye.